Deriving explores infertility.
This meeting is being recorded.
Sorry. Deriving explores infertility, motherhood, and family, while troubling colonial legacies of language and Canadian identity. Jennifer's book of lyric essays entitled Micrographia is forthcoming this coming fall from Gordon Hill Press. She is a member of New West Press's board and a settler living here in Treaty 6. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thanks, Michelle. Welcome, everyone. I want to begin our conversation by acknowledging that the University of Alberta Press and this place we're gathering in today are in Amiskwaciy-Waskahikan, Treaty 6 territory, and Métis Region 4, home and gathering place for diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, and Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others. And for those of you joining us online, please share in the chat what territory you are joining us from. These three wonderful collections of poetry we are celebrating today, all in different ways, consider connections to place and culture and the geography of home, from the intimacies of family and the neighborhood to the stewardship of our planet. So as a way of beginning that conversation, I'd like to invite all of us to reflect on our own relationships and responsibilities to the Indigenous lands we call home. And for those of us here in person at the Poetry Festival, I'd like to point out that there's an Indigenous Poets Society event happening tomorrow evening, which promises to be a great event. I'd also like to let you all know that the event today is being recorded. We are honored to have Alice Major here with us today, Edmonton's first poet laureate and the person responsible for launching Poetry Festival. And we invite her to say a few words.
Thank you so much. Now, am I broadcasting well now? First of all, I would like to echo on behalf of the festival the land acknowledgement that you just gave, Jennifer. We are really grateful to be located here on the land now known as Treaty 6, where people have been creating songs, stories, prayers for millennia, for 10,000 years at least. And personally, I find it immensely moving to think that Cree, just one of the many languages that have been spoken here, is actually older than the English in which I am speaking right now. How much has been said, how much listening we have to do with respect and care. And this is the spirit that the Poetry Festival approaches its mission in. Now, I just want to say briefly, again, how happy we are to partner with the University of Alberta Press. This is not the first time we've been together for the literary launch, and I'm delighted that we can actually meet again in person. It's wonderful. The U of A Press produces beautiful books from excellent authors, and we're really happy to celebrate the launch of 3 more. And finally, can I give you some quick thanks from the festival to some other people, our own funders, the Edmonton Arts Council, the Alberta Foundation for the Arts, Canadian Heritage, to our volunteers. There are so many of them helping keep this afloat through the week, including James and Sherry over at the table there. And our staff, Shima Robinson and Megan, I don't know how we would get through this burst of creativity without them. They have been stellar. So thank you all. Back to the press for what's going to happen now.
Thanks, Alice. So now I'd like to ask Douglas Hildebrand, Director and Publisher of University of Alberta Press to say a few words of welcome.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you. Literary Editions is a highlight of any year at the Press. I'd like to thank the Edmonton Poetry Festival for supporting the event, as well as Jennifer for acting as our host. I'd like to welcome and thank our three wonderful readers. Working with Joe, Sonja, and Uche this year has been an absolute privilege. And we're proud that you've chosen to publish your incredible work with us, for allowing us to travel on that journey with you. On behalf of all my colleagues at the Press, it's an honor to have you have a part in sharing your words with the world. Congratulations.
Thanks, Doug. I think it's time to hear from our readers. We have three wonderful authors tonight joining us from Calgary, Toronto, and St. John's. All of these authors published books with University of Alberta Press in 2023. We are fortunate to have two joining us live and in person in Edmonton. The books featured tonight are the newest contributions to the Press's Robert Croach series. Later, the poets will have a chance to answer questions from the audience. And those of you online, feel free to type your questions into the chat and we will watch for those. We would also like to note that Glass Bookshop is the bookseller for Edmonton's Poetry Festival, and they have stock of all the books on hand at the back there. So now let's turn to the readings. We will begin with Joe Bishop. So Joe, please go ahead and turn on your audio while I introduce you. Joe Bishop is the author of the chapbook Dissociative Songs. His work has appeared in literary journals across Canada and abroad. He lives in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. Today, he will be reading from Indie Rock. This collection candidly focuses on a queer poet and musician's life in Newfoundland and his struggles with addiction, OCD, and trauma. Please welcome Joe.
Hi, can everybody hear me? Yes. Yes, everyone can hear me. Okay. I'm just going to start talking. So I'm really honored to be published with two really other great poets. I feel like there's feedback or something. I got a chance to read both Monitoring Station and There's More, and they're like really phenomenal books, really two very unique voices. So I'm very proud to be all right, well, I'll just start with
I don't think you can see me.
I can't see anything, only myself. Okay, Okay, I'll start with this poem, Low Down, Low Down. It's it kind of touches on all the themes, a lot of the themes in the book, like what it's like to be an artist, and grief and mourning, and also dealing with addiction. And it's sort of about that moment where the speaker, me, decides to get help. And it's sort of like how your mind sort of tries to convince you not to get help. Okay, I hope I'm sounding okay. Let's take a little. Low down, low down. Waiting on her bench by the bay window, waiting like a sailor's wife, seconds chipping. She'd scribble black phrases on bars, claw copper wire out of her scalp, claw jarring jangles from careworn piano keys, waiting to snort a brief supply. From her great-grandmother's, we shipped that played-out heirloom here. Here it stands out in our front room like an old saloon prop, like it might plunk the entertainer by itself. Instead, it stands upright with the lid shut. I wait on her bench for my lift to arrive. I wait for the drive to the recovery center. I'll hand over stained Hanes to a social worker, squat after she searches my bag. The nurses will patronize in ivory pitches. I'll hear the grave left hand weigh down the young and the restless theme, read verse fraught with motley platitudes and bad grammar on bulletin boards, bunk with a junkie's bottomless armpit reek. He'll share abominations, and with a flimsy pillow, hush me, paranoid I might sing. Okay. So, I think I'll read that one next. I'll go with this one instead. Sorry about that. This one is called Yankee Boys of Argentia. Well, it's kind of self-explanatory, but I grew up in this little Irish Catholic town called Placentia, and it was next to a naval base in Argentia. It's the next town over. And it was sort of like, it's about growing up with, going to school with like army brats. And anyway, Yankee Boys of Argentia. I grew up beside an American naval base. They called us Newfs, we called them Yanks, though many stationed came with southern drawls. I'd befriend Virginian brats like Peter York. I'd crave the nicotine that tanned his teeth, laissez-faire vowels taking their time on his tongue, more than the stockpile of switchblades he smuggled. I aped how Peter sloped like he favored wounds, envied each camel his thumb and index pinched. I wish I could repeat his twisted Jody calls. He traded penthouse pets and Playboy bunnies, stains of his tributes stuck on centerfolds. Peter served as fodder for filthy dreams of freedom. We would kill our Sundays 10-pin bowling. This one I'm kind of reading on a dare. I wasn't going to read this one, but because it's kind of mentioned stuff that anyway, but in the, why not? So it's called Gary. Okay. Gary brought it to my attention, lying nude on my made bed. His index finger spiraled my nude bicep. Gazing, he inquired into the tinkling sound. I confessed I didn't know where it came from. He left traces on my tongue and duvet. I didn't hear tinkling for nights, but tonight there's just enough breeze. Not unlike the tinkling breeze that night I blew and rimmed Gary, and it bothered me more, and then I got out of bed, tracked chimes down. I cut them from my neighbor's line. They lie like marionettes on my nightstand. This one's called Dance Song. I guess you just need to know that George Michael, the pop star from the 80s and 90s, I guess, he was outed in California, I believe, going to public bathrooms, and he sort of made a fun like dance song about it, and it was people sort of kind of forgive him, even though he never really had the career he had before that. Okay, yeah, I guess that's all you need to know. Dance song. Before George Michael made visits to John's for jollies, chic, in a cheeky dance song, on our island, dozen after dozen, entrapped men behind stall doors had fun in the village shopping mall. I watched every evening the square-jawed anchor man reveal names or photos, clips of the men in cuffs, blab till the weather with neutered disgust. A note passed in class out at my neighbor in the next row marked him as a nephew. It snowballed to a shit-knocking at lunch. He wore a scarlet scrap of his uncle's brunt. I think I kind of barreled through that one. I'm going to try to slow it down a bit. I'm not sure how much time I have. This one's called Father's Day. I haul on his rubber boots, pack tackle box aboard, part glinting pond on which my old man taught me how to skate. My grown hands recoil, recalling numb small fingers tighten laces to his standard. This morning, sun's knuckles. I bait hook, cast lured line, scratch what will be beard. Relive one morning when I was 5 and Dad took me here ice fishing. He didn't trust farther out, laid down stick, ordered, do not pass. Boring auger, his glance caught me, gliding past. Caught rothole snatching. Submerged in the jolt of his hand hooking hood, our teeth clacking, I reel. He woke me nights later, casting wails down the hall, hauled from dreams outcome, moral for sons who won't listen. So yeah, okay, 2 more. This one I'm going to kind of read with an Irish accent because I can't, that's how it comes out when I read it. It's not even really put on, it's not really an Irish accent, it's a Newfoundland accent, I suppose, but so much of our accent is tied with Ireland anyway. It's called Young Feller's Tale. Nair a flabber on the Barris way, I heave a dead man's dive. Father's sod born on outer ring, he cut cord, drove past overpass. I roved with he and mother past, lichen claimed graves, beaver dams rigged from crabapple trees. We climbed tolts, traipsed gullies, waded through bog, weaved erratics, the stunted tuckamores over barrens and tangled in pines. Maggoty nibbers nipped, roots flipped me arse over kettle, mudder smooched where it smirt. We made Naira queak, stitching warmth from pelts. I spark splits come duckish, brindy boughs crackled and creamed. Flankers sprayed as from junks I dropped. Fodder spun one of his yarns. He'd tell of a spell in a whale, how his bites dug floors of blubber, how he built a flew-up blowhole. Pay he no heed, muttered say. I jillick mid a screecher of gulls. Humpbacks blast and gush to fathom the sun's harpoons. The sea sings her hooks in me deeps. And just one last one, and then I guess that will be time, hopefully. Little Sea Song. Father, I glom onto seafarer fear, like some horseshoe forged before the wars, or a souvenir, them rusty hooks we found, dear dad who dwells on turf and still afar, while dandelions rise to reflect dawn, adrift in a boat with your cloudy breath, catching dumb cod, and you revive, old man, done with old wives' tales, and though the voyage never carried out as hoped, and I drowned once I sank with the long liner, as hard as I hold on to my name we both know, no longer that stout sailor then was I, those years ago, and 1 year drags to 10, when decay turns to decades in clean bone. I forgot to mention the poem is kind of based on, it was inspired by a song called Jackie by Sinead O'Connor, and in that song it's a lover who's dead singing to her lover who's a sailor who died anyway, and so it's kind of I just wanted to see what it's like to speak from a point of view of a ghost, I guess. That's it. Hopefully you liked it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Joe, for that really moving, beautiful. Oh. Yeah, I did already. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, I think it's working. Really moving reading, Joe. Thanks so much. It was beautiful. I can't wait to ask you some questions about it in a little while. But next up, we have Sonja. I'm getting a little feedback. Monitoring Station. Hear me? Okay. Monitoring Station is Sonja Ruth Greckol's 4th book after No Line in Time, 2018, Skein of Days, 2014, and Gravity Matters, 2008. Monitoring Station can be described as feminist experimental lyric poetry that embodies the passage of a damaged world across generations. Stephen Collis, author of A History of the Theories of Rain, describes her work in Monitoring Station this way, quote, "Under Greckol's lyric microscope, small things loom large, and beauty is always a hair's breadth from disaster. This is one of our very best poetic minds, humming along at the top of her form." Sonja's work has appeared in numerous literary journals. She is the founding poetry editor for Women and Environments International. She had a settler childhood in Treaty 6 territory and now lives in Toronto. Welcome, Sonja.
I'm going to try to attach this. Is this loud enough? And we're going to manage this. And I'm not going to drop anything or spill anything. We can always hope. You know, it's a great pleasure. I have many feels being in the Rutherford Library. This, I think, used to be the reading room where I spent many hours as an undergraduate. Only some of them were productive. Now, I want to start with some thank yous. First of all, I'm going to thank Margaret Christakos, who edited this collection, and then Michelle Lofquist, Michelle over here, and Kathy Crooks. Where are you, Kathy? Okay, okay, who you know, whose careful attentions really brought this book along. And then there was Dina Janowski and Mary Lou Rowley and Duncan Turner, whose very careful eyes on the details helped it along. And finally, Alan Brownhoff. I don't know if you've seen the book, but he did just such a gorgeous job with the cover and the inside of the book. I'm really grateful to him. And of course, to the Edmonton Poetry Festival for inviting me, and the Press for hosting me, and all of you for coming. Am I getting an echo here? Oh. This book came together from dailiness over many months and years of daily writing practice. Arcs crossed my mother's death, my grandbaby's birth in 2017, and her first years. And then the pandemic crashed in 2020. And what do writers do? Writers write when there are other things to do, like cleaning your groceries and you know, all those other early precautions. Language places me in the world, and in small places and in the largest places. And in this book, I'm working time and space, my body, politics, the earth, and the universe through uncertainty, through culpability, through loss, and of course, through loving. Monitoring Station has an epigraph from Norbesi Philip, which reads, "Everyone has had someone breathe for them until the first gap, until the first gasp for air. Do our cells carry this epigenetic memory of a form of sharing and exchange, a modeling of a we that we can take into our varied practices?" The first poem, My Mother's Death. Because of ourselves. Flung front, skidding, knowing certainly not where, not when, black ice ahead. Poorly wired into the world, but the salt spoon is at hand, and the masking tape and giving birth opened a bracket. My syntax dapples every day with that moment in the mirror that travels farther than it appears. Bodies at rest do not move toward each other unless the strength of their attraction surpasses inertia. Their velocity determines the trajectory unless probability shakes the scaffold. Symmetry absent left, gaping a fish gasping for word lift, rigor gone, trolling, gleaning, afraid of showing up, not knowing. Oh, okay. I thought I was supposed to slow down because that's often the problem. Okay, thank you very much. I'm leashed here. November 2017, November 29 at 8:30 a.m. Freya Kate, born hungry, amongst those who eat heartily, suckles with gusto, catapulting me besotted, confused, tracing a line longer. My mother's name honors her where I could not a repair, but relief, like a stent, not quite effective, not quite necessary, serving a line longer. Okay, we're gonna get this right. Okay, how's this? Everything good? Okay, it's complicated. Nothing like this has ever happened before. Ethereal interstellar visitor. No, just an infant. Our infant, unusually elongated, strong material, avoided breaking apart, passed gravitationally unbound, expelled from her encumbering planet, whelms our galaxy solo. Our Aumuama. And then 1 year, reliving my night terrors, child of Hiroshima and bomb tests, convinced the world would end, mothering with Reagan and Brezhnev, desperate to protect your mother in the event of nuclear war, fear of my fears. And recognizing these grand fears attends certainty. I walk white each night without fear, shop without scrutiny, travel subways unnoticed, reveal myself, my place, one who claims space. Face to face with precarious life, I breathe better. Coal-fired plants shuttered the city, breathes better. My granddaughter is without lead in her blood. Grassy Narrows people carry 6 decades of mercury poisoning, generations of Minamata disease documented and resisted. Indigenous communities boil drinking water with fuel oil, absent power lines. Knew it, know it. Yearning for the large, stumble on the small stuff. Small things, thing up. Oxytocin rushes my cells, waterfall of Orion, trapezium in the star-forming region, laced with filaments of fear, anxiety for water, air, cascade of care, ring of fire, nickel, copper, chromium, best's breathing lands, in this now. You loved me, and you let this happen. And the final poem when COVID crashed, Mobius. What is coming down appears so large, still, constellated data points gasp the nation while numerators quail. There's quailing, and then there's full-on panic facing the camera full. Denominators undo, say aerosolized. Only scientists thought that word 2 weeks ago. Perhaps hitching rides, motility challenges, mortality. And there's a volcanic earthquake in the Canary Islands. Full moon threnody to shattered lives, or tattered at the very least, while Zoom cannot avert the plague without locusts, boils, frogs, or hail in the immediate vicinity. The passing star falls in, everything vanishes, we count. Ready, steady, confetti? Our small goes close, generating gravity. We pull away, disrupting the barnacle. Longing wrenches the matrix, right here and there. Masses shift across roads in India, abandoning the city, grandparents carrying toddlers and pots. The star crossing my dark sheds joy, continues to orbit on the inner edge of giggle dust surrounding I'm mad. I really want Jima to come to my few hugs and cuddles. Rigel, witchhead, flame fox, creature her dreams, haunt her swath of sky, born 2.5 years, streamed her newborn mother, harboring the nebula, dubbed small, pivoting her big hourglass orbit. This mighty force emits our reflected light. Without touch, the matrix, the body-to-body wrap that warps absence, warps time, wraps skin to fascia, to fluid, courses waving tufts of absence. Slightly hazy skies, no traffic jam in Toronto, just an impressive pile of black squirrels frolicking under daffodils, raccoons taking the Danforth at night, leaving no carcasses. Venus nestles again midst the Pleiades, 8 years after the pandemic was on the World Bank's horizon. The raccoon, barred tail and face, rules Chester subway entrance at 9 p.m., slowly glances up at passing dogs, not unnerved by proximity, done but grooming, it sidles along, unalarmed nature, easing among alerts, glowing hot red, fearful of breath, fearful lack, spiraling dark vapor lanes, orbiting the commons, masked 6 feet. And finally, the last section in Mobius. Dung beetles disorient in hats or under clouds or polluted atmosphere, losing the Milky Way, falling prey, anchoring us in the sandbox under the sprinkler, and then clarity in a small piece of the critical zone, staking tomatoes, learning fluid dynamics from water-filled doggy bags, biodegradable, of course. In the prospect of Small's hugs, just out of reach, hover aches, outfolding futures, straddle transgressions, fungal planetary stellar blur I cannot disarm, stranding my joyous giggly pod, frizzy with hugs and cuddles, oxytocin unleashes, drains dormant, elegiac puddles, stagnated in rocky shoals, resentment stoppered, flow of flows, small drains touch hunger. Thank you.
Thanks, Sonja. I think it's so fitting to hear poetry about the pandemic in the midst of the little technical difficulties that have come to kind of represent the pandemic in many ways. So thanks for your patience, everyone. And for those of you online joining us from Calgary, I'm happy to announce that Sonja will be reading there tomorrow night at 7 p.m. at Shelf Life Books. Ryan Fitzpatrick is launching his new book, Sunny Ways, and we'll be joined for an evening of readings by poets Wayman Chan and Nikki Sheppy, as well as Sonja. So the event will be at Shelf Life Books at 7 p.m. So our last reader, Uchechukwu Peter Umezurike, is a Nigerian-born, Calgary-based poet, fiction writer, essayist, and literary journalist. He is the author of Double Wahala, Double Trouble, Wishmaker, and a co-editor of Wreaths for Wayfarers. He is a contributor to the website Read Alberta, and we encourage you to read his interviews and articles there. He is an assistant professor of English at the University of Calgary. In his collection, There's More, Uche navigates immigrant life with a multifaceted awareness of joy, melancholia, loss, and hope. Kiki Petrosino, author of White Blood, tells us, quote, with a full heart and keen inquiry, Umezurike finds tender language for the ineffable sting of departure, the ache of remembrance. Welcome, Uche.
So I'm just going to take a cue from Sonja. And, okay, yeah, good. So just in case I come across a bit clunky or clumsy, just bear with me. So thank you, Jennifer, for that amazing introduction. And thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to the University of Alberta Press and Edmonton Poetry Festival for putting this wonderful event together. And I'm bringing greetings from Calgary, 27. It's good to be back here. I just left here 7 or 8 months ago, and I'm so excited to be back among friends, colleagues, lovers of literature, and for this community. So my collection titled There Is More, as you can see, it has a photo of a group of migrants or immigrants. And this collection offers me a way to think about what it means to be in Canada, but not only in Canada, for any migrants to be in a place they are hoping to remake home. So in this collection, I try to understand questions about home, community, connections, kinship, whether kinship between people or kinship between humans and non-humans. So, but more importantly, this collection contemplates how we think about home, how we can build home among people who don't look like us or who perhaps don't even speak the way we speak. So I want to invite you into this world of migrancy, migration, community, connections, belonging, home, and otherness. So this first poem is titled On Their Evening Walk Through an Alley. On their evening walk through an alley, the sky bleeding like beets blanched in a sieve. A couple find a girl young enough to be their granddaughter, sprawled on the asphalt, her skin the color of roasted beans. The couple ponder the girl. She could be drunk. She could be dead. She could be kin to neighbors whose names swell like waves rocking a boat. But she looks nothing like us, the woman whispers, and they veer toward the lit street. So I was going to read a poem titled In My Father's Shoes, but yesterday I told my colleague at the University of Calgary that I was coming to Edmonton to read a poem. And he said he liked the collection, but he was angry with me because in that particular poem, I said the flames lost to oilers. So he put me in a jam. He said I have to write another poem in which I have to restore the integrity of the flames, so it doesn't seem as if the flames are losers. So, and I hope if I get back to Calgary, I'll be able to, well, not say the Oilers would lose to Flames this time around, but find maybe the Kings. So, so this poem is different. It's titled Seagulls. Seagulls weave over your head where the middle seal exhales its salt in your face. The sky looms a different blue. Thoughts waver between mangoes and olives, then coalesce a consolation. We call home anywhere we find something to love. Home is no more than concrete and earth. Now you've made here your home. Distance is not a familiar place, not like two palms pressed together in prayer, more like the song you can't stand remembering. Each time you eat an olive, when you would rather peel the skin of a mango that tastes familiar. That's the burden every time you raise your head to glance at the family browsing the bank for shells and pebbles. For now, the burden, as the middle sea slips away beyond the horizon, unaffected by such ephemera. So this poem I'm about to read, so a good number of my poems, I get the inspiration from just reading news and happenings around the world. And in the last couple of years, you might have heard about migrants dying in the Mediterranean Sea, across the Sahara Desert on their way to Europe. So in this poem, I was trying to just think about what it means to be in this space and time, to live in a world where the frequency of death in a way has become so common that it's just something we see on the news and then just move on. So this poem is titled Body of Bones. At least, dash, dash, dash. Migrants died in multiple shipwrecks off the coast of dash, dash, dash. Eyes, they don't see. This body of bones tell. Ears, they don't hear. Tails of bones. Nostrils, they don't smell. Bones adrift. Bones ashores. Bones under sea. Mouth, they don't speak. Bones breaking news. News breaking bones. Bearing histories. Hands, they don't feel. Bodies that the water don't keep. Bones, the water keep. Bodies returning to silts. Bodies returning to worms. Who's to blame for the bones that not see, that not hear, that not smell, that not speak, that not feel? The sea, it's hunger deep enough. The land, it's hunger deep enough. The boat, it's hunger deep enough. Families on the shore, their hunger, they hunger deep as the ocean. So this poem is titled The Sea is the Bridge. The sea is the bridge between home and horizon. The boat is two lips locked in prayer, trailing desire. The moon skims the bodies, gleaming like fish. The sea tucks her arms around bodies the boat has shed. The sea, the boat, the moon, the bodies, there are fish bones in stories we do not share. And lastly, so this is not a gloomy poem, it's a bit delicious. So it's titled On Slicing a Mango, One Midday. The scent of ripe mangoes is enough to yellow the moment, round with the impulse to forget, to eat and expend. Tangible enough, the ripeness that pops a moment of hunger into a little stream, draping through fingers. Full enough, the scent of ripe mangoes is just full enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Uche. That was so powerful. And thank you to all three of our fantastic readers tonight, Joe, Sonja, and Uche. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to our Q&A session now. And because of the technical complexities, we're going to try and kind of do questions for each poet one at a time. We won't be, too rigid about that, but we're going to start by asking questions of Joe. So if anybody has a question specifically for Joe, feel free to put it in the chat, and those of you in the audience, feel free to raise your hands. But I'm going to start because I have the microphone, and I have lots of questions for Joe. But the one that I want to ask first is, I'm so struck by the influence of music in your collection, both the sonic quality of like word choices and repetition and alliteration, but then there's also musical allusions, and then the formal choices, the structural choices. And so many of them I recognized as having a particular rhythm and structure of traditional Newfoundland songs, because my family is also from Newfoundland. So I'm curious if any of these poems, some of them actually are called songs, have a tune to go with them. And maybe more broadly than that, if you can just talk a little bit about how music informs your poetics.
Sure. Can everybody hear me? I don't know. I'm hearing a bit of feedback, but
Yeah,
I
Joe, just hang on one sec, Joe. It's
hello?
I think you're good.
Okay. Yeah. So like that poem, Little Sea Song, I kind of play around with that, and I had a little tune on my guitar that I actually was gonna like perform the poem instead of sing it, instead of read it, but I kind of chickened out at the last minute, and I convinced myself that it's reading and I can't really but I'm kind of more of an amateur musician, but I'm like really like fascinated by music, and I think music is what drives me more than anything. Like I like metaphors and all that other stuff too, but I think it's music at the end of the day that really keeps me interested in poetry. And I just like the way words sound. I'm really, I like trying to make music out of words. I get a real, I get really, I really enjoy it. It's a kind of a passion. Okay, I think that answers your question. I'm not sure.
It does. Thanks so much. I'd love to open it up to the floor if there's any questions from anyone in here for Joe, or anyone online that has a question for Joe. So the question, Joe, is that a squeeze box on the table behind you, and
Yes.
can you play it?
No, I'm not. I really am too kind of.
I think we
No, I haven't played the accordion in a long time, and it's something I'm just trying to get into again. Recently, I took a course in it in university, and I don't know. I'm too. I wouldn't be able to. No, too nervous. Sorry, but yeah, that is an accordion. I just got it as a gift recently. Actually, my neighbor gave it to me, and it just I was really delighted, and started fiddling around with it again. But no, the answer is no. Sorry. Just really, it's too much stage fright. Reading is enough, but hello?
Okay. Thanks for your patience, Joe.
I shouldn't have teased you with it. Sorry.
No, that's okay. We've got a little bit of a delay, because what's happening is people in the audience are asking questions, and I'm going to try and relay them. And then I think if you can just wait a little moment before you start speaking, we seem to have to mute on this end for the sound to work. So like we're losing just the beginning of what you're saying when you come in. So just wait a moment after you unmute. Okay, so I'm going to try and actually, if you can repeat it, that would be great. Then I won't mess up what you said.
Interested in Joe's reflections on the relationship between his poetic work and his struggles with addiction and mental health.
Yeah, so the question is about the connection between your poetry and your struggles with addiction and mental health, if you can talk about that a little bit.
Well, I still struggle with addiction and mental health issues, but probably in a better place now than I was. I find poetry sort of therapeutic when it comes to that sort of thing. I mean, it's obviously, there's a lot more to poetry than just that. I mean, I don't like to think like, I don't like this whole idea like there's a correlation between madness or something and poetry, because it's kind of like a stereotype, and I don't really think that's true. I definitely know that I write better when I'm in a better frame of mind, and but I also think like I kind of need to struggle to have something to write about, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, you know, right now I still smoke a lot of marijuana, for example, and cigarettes, but I don't drink anymore. And I find being really candid, like sometimes like it's a thing that really goes against my like it's kind of it's the fear of like being just really honest and open about all this stuff, but at the same time it's exhilarating, and I like fighting against it. So I find like just being open about this stuff, and maybe one day like somebody might read my work and sort of identify with it and know that they're not alone. So I mean, there's a benefit to it. Kind of rambling on, sorry. I hope that answers somewhat.
She is nodding her head. And I can also say that that was, yeah, a really, really powerful answer. Are there any more questions for Joe? Okay, well, oh, there's two in the chat.
Oh, okay. Those are great questions. I'll answer those now, I guess.
Sorry, Joe.
I just see the questions there, so I'll just go ahead and answer in the message below.
Joe, do you want to answer out loud so that our audience
sure.
here?
Yeah, that makes more sense, yeah. So one of my favorite poems of yours is Father's Day. What was the inspiration for that poem? Well, I really did fall through the ice when I was 5 years old, and you know, really like that's not a made-up poem. And I guess just reflecting on it, and I find thinking about it in terms of like it was one of the first traumatic experiences I've ever had. I was only 5 and I almost died, and I could still remember it really quite clearly. And sometimes I wonder if that's where all the where everything went wrong, maybe, or also sometimes wonder like crazy things like maybe I died that day and this is all just a fantasy. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's something that it was like a big traumatic experience that happened to me when I was 5, and I'll never forget it. So yeah, it's probably one of my favorite poems too. I really worked hard on that poem. It took a lot out of me. So I'm glad you liked it. That's it. And the other one is, you mentioned that you found Gospel Drunk by Aidan Chafin inspiration. Do you want to talk a bit about that? Yeah, so that's sort of how I came across the press. I can't remember how I ended up with that book, but I remember reading it and feeling like, well, the press, if Alberta Press, if they're going to publish him, well, they might publish my work because it was so similar in a lot of ways. I mean, he had a lot of demons that I could really relate to, and also not only just his topics or subjects, but also his form, the way he uses form and music, and like he has sonnets and things like that. So I really, really identify with it. I think he's one of, like, just a really great poet. Yeah, I can still remember that book. It's really good. Yeah. So sorry, I'm just really shy, so it's hard to come up with like great answers on the top of my head. But yeah, it was an inspiration for sure, and definitely a motivator for me submitting to University of Alberta Press. I think that's it for the 2 questions. So.
Thanks so much, Joe. I think we'll move on to questions for our other 2, but that doesn't mean that you can't ask more questions of Joe. We'll just sort of coordinate how that will happen. So I'm going to turn to questions for a question for Sonja. And Sonja will have to kind of pass the mic back and forth so those online will be able to hear us. So I was really struck when reading your book by the feeling of immediacy. And so I really noted what you said at the beginning about how you had this daily practice. So I was curious if the daily practice changed at all when the pandemic crashed, as you said. For me, I found that I couldn't write at all for the first like 10 months of the pandemic. And I've heard that so often. So I'm wondering if it shifted that daily practice at all, or if it just continued and shifted the topic.
Well, that's an interesting question. Actually, I can't seem to get this right. Okay. The daily practice is actually a larger organized practice called the grind, which I note in the acknowledgements of the book. And what it is a group of people who sign on for a month of writing, and they share that writing each day with about 10 other people. And your only obligation is to send it out. You don't have to respond to anybody else's, but you get about 10 pieces of writing every day. So I started doing that in 2015. And in fact, the first month in which I did it, and one of the people on the Zoom, Lee Gould, is who introduced me to this, to the grind. And the people who make the introduction are threatened all kinds of ways to only introduce people who will do a full month, right? So that you can keep the whole thing going. Anyway, I have done that for months on end ever since 2015. So I don't know how many months I would have done it. I've never kept track. But at the beginning of the pandemic, that's what I did. I sat down and I wrote every day. So, you know, what crops up is what's in the newspaper, what was happening on the playground, what the raccoons were doing at my subway stop, all of those things. And what was happening in the universe through photographs from various parts of the universe. So it's very much a kind of external practice. I'm gathering data, I used to do statistics, right? So it's all data reduction, right? You put it all together.
Are there questions from the audience? Yeah, Jenny.
One of the lines you said, "You loved me and let this happen."
So Jenny's question is, one of the lines is, "You loved me and you let this happen," which is so one of my favorite lines. Who are you talking
to? It's my granddaughter speaking to me, right? All these things that I knew about, and you know, I mean, what did we do to control those fears and those things that are still emergencies? So it's my granddaughter, and she calls me Jima. So there's also her voice in the last poem.
Alicia, are there any questions online?
No.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Anyone else have a question?
Please.
I also come from a science background. background and an interest in poetry, and I'm wondering what your experience is between kind of bridging those two hemispheres of thinking.
Oh, the question is about bridging the two hemispheres of thinking between science and poetry.
You put your finger on my fraudulence. I am not a scientist by any stretch of the imagination. My undergraduate work was in psychology and English, and I did women's studies for a long time, did graduate work in psychology, and various kinds of practices. Bridging. Right? that was a land too far.
Any other questions?
Thanks.
I'll ask one more. I'm not gonna let you off the hook that quickly.
Okay.
I mean, maybe building on that last question, you have this astronomical theme throughout, and I'm wondering if that was something that you, like, did you have the shape of a book with that kind of theme in mind as you were writing these pieces, or did it just kind of come more organically, for the lack of a better word? Did you just find you had a lot of pieces where that kept cropping up?
Two things. I was born immediately post-war, post-European war. So the whole of science and physics was sort of very much part of my childhood, right? And the language of the bomb and science and the great good it was going to deliver, right, was very much, and I used it in my second book, which was a kind of annual portrait of newspapers that I did sort of over the course of my life until about 2000. And one of those, I used physics articles in the course of that. So there's always been that strand in my writing. And I get something called the astronomy photo of the day every day, right, on my laptop. And so I gaze at the universe every day. So of course it enters.
Perfect.
Some days I don't, and it accumulates.
Any more questions for Sonja? Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have like any advice for like emerging and their, I guess, dream of taking writing seriously? That venture, because you talk about the grind, and I'm like, I've done something similar, and it's transformed my writing, but it also takes a lot of energy, and I don't know, how do you navigate that?
I'll just repeat the question for those online. The question is, do you have any advice for emerging poets?
My advice is simply to write, right? Always to write. And at a certain point, you go back over your writing and you find the gems. You'll find all kinds of gems on your laptop or on your notebook, right? And you bring them forward, right? And it's a long practice, right? And some of the best advice I ever got was from somebody who was actually on the Zoom. I don't know if she's still there, Erin Murray, who was one of the first poets I worked with. And Erin says, whenever you have time, you write, right? If it's 5 minutes, you write for 5 minutes. If you have an hour, you write for an hour. So it is that kind of commitment to continuing to develop the practice and continuing to pursue it. Good luck.
Another question online. So Diana Manoli is asking why Mobius is the main metaphor for life during the COVID-19 pandemic.
I have a section early in the book, which I didn't read, which is titled Mobius, in which I describe a Mobius strip, right? Very in great detail, each step of cutting and pasting of the Mobius. And it really is a metaphor for all of the kinds of interactions and circles that divide and elongate and so on throughout the book. Good question, Diane. Thank you. They're all good questions, but she picked up on a very specific point.
Any more questions at the moment for Sonja? Maybe we'll put Uche up here, if that's all right. So my question for you is, you write in different genres, and I was really struck reading your book by how narrative some of the pieces are. And so I'm wondering how your work in different genres informs each other.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Jennifer. I don't think I have a definite answer for that, because sometimes I still trying to figure out how some of these things work or how I work. So I can't say for sure that there's a clear-cut way I straddle all these genres. So what I usually do, if I'm working on a particular genre, for instance, say a short story, and if it's not really working out well, I'll switch to poetry. And if that's not working well, I'll just go to maybe just a sort of reflective writing or a vignette, or just describe the sun, the moon, the chickadills flying from one branch to another, or just the black squirrel in the backyard. So sometimes I just gaze and, well, the ideas later crystallize and I take it from there. So I can't say, oh, this is how I work. So in a way, I'm a bit disorganized. so I know there are some people who are very meticulous, who are very disciplined, studious, but for me, I can procrastinate a lot. So sometimes, but when I get in the group, I just flow with it. So that's it's just all over the place. I can be all over the place at times, yeah.
Ask a follow-up. Does a piece ever start as, say, a poem and become a story, or vice versa? Does it, or do you keep your genres fairly distinct?
I try as much as possible to keep the genres distinct and separate. So if I'm working on a poem, I just work on a poem. So there's no way the poem for me evolves into becoming a short fiction. So if I'm writing a short story, I just stick with that. So I don't set out to write a poem and then it later turns into maybe a creative nonfiction or just a short story. So I'm very practical when it comes to deciding what I want to work on at any given point in time. So like when I started working on this collection, I just did all my writing was about just, they're all poems. So I think that's the only way I can say I'm very organized. I can compartmentalize myself in working in a particular genre and then move over to some other one that has that sort of distinctness about it. Yeah. Thank you.
Questions from the audience? Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank all the three poets for their powerful readings. And then I have two questions for Uche, but they're kind of interrelated. So my first question is about how do you explain, how can you write about inexplicable pains? So, for example, when you're talking about sea as a bridge, as you know that it is not a bridge in reality. And do you write your poems? My second question: do you write your poems at one sitting, or does it come, in chunks? And what time of the day do you usually write them?
I'm going to try and summarize that. The second question was around, do you write kind of in one sitting or in chunks, and what time of day, and kind of question around the process. And then the first part was, how do you write about the inexplicable? Is that close enough?
Inexplicable pains.
Inexplicable pains.
So thank you very much. liar for those sets of questions. So I'll tackle them as best as I can. So I think one thing poetry does is to offer us an opening into the other's pain, even though we may not be able to articulate clearly the pain of the other, but at least to feel with possibly what they might be experiencing at that point in time. So in a way, poetry is a source of empathy for the other. And of course, we know empathy also has its own complications or its own limits. But for me, what I try to do is to have a conversation. So put myself in the other person's shoes and see how I can better understand their travail. So for instance, like I read the dailies and then I hear about somebody trying to make their way from the US to Canada border, and then they in maybe under minus 39 or that something degrees, and then they eventually come into Canada and perhaps they lost their fingers. Actually, there's someone who last week or 2 weeks ago was talking about how he made a crossing from the US to Canada in very inclement weather, and then he lost his 10 fingers. And so for me, that question comes up, like, how do you feel for this person? How do you imagine what drove them from home, perhaps in Africa, to US and eventually to Canada? So of course, that kind of pain is not something I can explain to myself because I'm not the one receiving that pain or dealing with that pain. So for me, poetry has always been a way to really think about pain, particularly the pain of the other. And I think that's for me, the first step to thinking about kinship, about community, what it means to be with those people who do not have that sort of comfort or privilege you have. So back to your question, how, if I write chunks of poem or just at a snap of the fingers or in a blink of an eye, some poems, they come easily, and like everyone would know, Alice, Sonja, Lisa, and Luciana, every poet will tell you they have moments where this poem or a poem comes out fully embodied, and then there are times the poem just comes out disembodied, and then you just have to mold and keep shaping. It can take you a week, it can take you 2 weeks, it can take you even a day. So there are poems I've written that take me just a day, and of course, it doesn't mean that they are very good, but there are also poems that can take you very long. So it depends on how the kind of conversation you are having with the poem and how unwieldy the poem is as you try to make meaning, give it some sort of cohesiveness or coherence and resonance to that. So I think, and then I don't have any particular time to write. I was on the bus, which was like 3 hours from Calgary to here. And I was just playing with some ideas, and I was just looking out the window, and I got some ideas for a set of poems. And so what I did was just to start putting down those ideas, taking notes, and then playing with images, and then playing with some words. So I'm just open. I think, like Sonja was mentioned earlier, it's just to be open to your environment, to the land, to people, to whatever nature has to offer you, whether it's energies, forces, vibrations, or even melodies. So the thing is just to be open and then allow that conversation to take place between you and what is out there. So I hope I've not come across as too long-winded. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more question. Go ahead.
Again, thank you so much for the opportunity to listen to a few sessions from your report. I'm curious as to how you juggle different writing styles, so to speak. So what I mean by that is, writing sort of more creatively in the form of poems, as opposed to, as you're an academic and writing in a more sort of structured way. How do you juggle, how do you straddle those different, positions? Is it the case that, you find this more energizing for, the academic stuff, or is it more stressful? I'm just curious as to how, I'm curious as to how you are able to remain active in sort of contributing or writing in both fields.
So the question for those online is about straddling or juggling creative writing and academic writing, and if they inform each other or maybe compete a little bit.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. Collins, for that complicated question. Yeah, so the first thing I do is just to find joy in the art of writing. And if it's delightful to me, I think it doesn't matter if one is attempting to just nudge the other side. And for me, all these different modes of conversation rather than writing gives me joy. So, and because I find joy in that, I'm able to just try to like shift to this one, do a bit on that, and then go to the other one. And I also think it's, so there are different conversations I'm having with each of these genre, and each of them comes with its own modalities. So for me, of course, there are times it's difficult. If I want to write maybe a critical essay, and then I'm thinking about writing a short story or a poem at that moment. And so I think that's where the tension comes in, where I have to say, oh, I want to write a poem. And then, of course, there are times I just keep warding off that urgency to write a poem or a short story. So, and then I know, oh, I have an article I have to review and submit back to a journal. And I would rather want to like just write about the quiet on those hills, or just a walk down a river valley. So sometimes, well, at the end, you just have to decide what you feel most comfortable working with or in at that point in time. Yeah, there's always a tension, but you just have to do what you can do. Yeah, thank you very much. So there's no magic formula or an elixir for that.
Thanks so much. And thanks to everybody who asked questions. I think we've reached the end of our time. I'm going to pass it back to Michelle for a few closing remarks.
Thank you. After that wonderful sampling of the work of these three fabulous writers, you'll be glad to know, as Jennifer mentioned at the beginning, that their books are available from Glass Bookshop here in Edmonton, or from our website, University of Alberta Press, or from your favorite local indie bookseller. And we have Magda at the back of the room here today with us from Glass Bookshop, so you can visit their table afterwards. I'd like to just say some thank yous in closing. First, thank you to our wonderful poets, to Joe, hi Joe, to Sonja and to Uche, to the Edmonton Poetry Festival for creating space for books and authors. Thank you to Jennifer for being our wonderful host today, to Glass Bookshop for being here and for being a key part of Edmonton's literary community, and to my colleagues, Kathy and Alicia and Doug, for handling the logistics to a complicated event, which I think was very successful. So thank you very much. And finally, to you guys, the audience, for joining us here to celebrate these works. So while we are saying goodbye to our online guests, we hope that you here in the room will stay for some treats and some conversation. So thank you very much again for spending this special time with us today. And there's lots of lovely messages in the chat.